Last War fans, Dirk Diggler here, and it's time to use those capital buffs. Oh, yeah. Okay, I'm going to show you how to use them and what they're good for in detail. I made a 10-minute video on this earlier today and forgot to unmute my mic. Anyhow, here we go. Attempt number 2, I'm going to show you how you're going to click on your avatar profile icon in the top left here. We're going to click on him, and then we're going to click on your server. Okay, there we go. Now you can see we lost an invasion, so we have the conquer over here. We're not going to do anything with that. We're going to totally ignore that, and we're going to focus on these 6 buffs right here. 5 of them are similar, and one of them is special. The Vice President's a special buff. I'll talk about that last. First, we're going to talk about these other 5 buffs here. The Secretary of Strategy buff, that is your hospital buff. That's your healing buff. So if you got a lot of people that need healing, this is the buff you're going to use for that. The Secretary of Security is your training buff, and that's the one I'm going to demonstrate with actually. Next, we have our development buff is for your construction speed up is primary, research speed up is secondary. After that, we have the Secretary of Science buff, which is the opposite. Your research speed up is primary, construction speed up is secondary. And lastly, we have the interior buff, which helps you boost your food, iron, and coin production. Okay, now you can see these 5 buffs here. The big thing is, how do you use them? I was thoroughly confused when these buffs first were available. And I thought, you just join them anytime, you get the buff, blah, 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 blah. That's not how it works. In order to use the buff, you have to, number 1, apply for the buff. Number 2, get in that buff position. And then once you're in the buff position is when you take an action that makes the buff applicable. So in this case, we're going to use this training cap buff, okay? So I'm going to go back to my base. And I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to speed this up just to bang this out. Here we go. Okay, good. Okay, now I'm going to select our barracks here, and you can see if I train 807 units, it's going to take me 1 day, 12 hours, and 40 minutes. So 1 day, 12 hours. Just remember that number. 1 day, 12 hours, 807. Okay, so now 1 day, 12 hours, 807. We're going to go here. We're going to go to the buff. We're going to click apply. When we click apply, it's going to put us in a queue where either the vice president or president have to approve you. So we're going to click apply. You can see it's pending in the applicants section now. Once I get approved, it's going to pop into the auto appointment list. And hopefully the VP is paying attention. He sees the red exclamation mark come up, and he approves it. We'll give him a minute before I ring his bell here. Good old Snow from Homelanders. Cool. Hopefully he sees the request to join and gets it approved. And I will actually pause the video and ping him. Okay, I didn't need to ping him. He did it himself. So we have been approved, and now we are pending. So in roughly a minute 10, so every 5 minutes when there's somebody in queue, the office changes automatically. I'm going to get bumped into the Secretary of Security position. And when that happens, I'm going to show you the difference it makes in our training. So right now, once again, 1 day, 12 hours, 40 minutes for 807. And you can see I have a message up here. You will take up the role of Secretary of Security in 1 minute and 21 seconds. Okay, cool. Gives us a little reminder now. That is new. So we're going to sit here. We've got another 30 seconds or so. But don't sit here and stare at this, because a lot of times you'll get bumped into it and it won't update in here. So don't trust this for when you actually have the position. So what I like to do is I like to back out completely, and I'll wait my time. I know I got about a minute left, so we'll wait, and we will get a notification when we are bumped into that position as well. And I shouldn't say, yeah, it's bumped, I suppose, but I use bumping for another term when you want to skip the line and you reach out to the VP or pres and they give you some priority here, but we're not going to do that right now. We're just simply going to wait our turn. Okay, here we go. Congratulations, you've been appointed as Secretary, blah, 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 blah. So we're going to go ahead and click on this. Now, look at this. We have 922 troops in 1 day and 12 hours. Okay, you notice the difference? That is due to that buff. Now, to take advantage of it, I have to be in that spot, and I have to click the train button. So I'm going to go ahead and click the train button, and there we go. It's training away, and you can see if I come here, Secretary of Security is the Diggler, meaning I have that buff activated. So these other buffs work very similar. So for example, the development buff, you have to be sitting in this spot, and when you are, you get to take advantage of that construction speed up. To do that, once again, you have to be sitting here with your name in there, and then you start the construction. So you have to have the buff, you start the construction, and you take advantage of that buff. And the same thing works for Secretary of Science. You wait till you're in the buff, then you start your research. And same thing as here with the Secretary of Strategy. You wait till you're in the buff, then you start your healing. Okay? Now, the only one that's a little different is our Secretary of Interior, where you wait until you're in the position, and then you collect your resources. Now, if you notice, because I'm sitting in this buff here, I cannot apply for another buff. So there's two ways to get out of that. Number one, if there's somebody in the queue, they automatically bump you out. The other way is to ask the Prez, or typically you ask the VP and say, hey, can you dismiss me from the queue? Then you can apply to another buff. So hopefully that makes sense. Now, we've talked about these buffs in detail. I'm going to talk about the last buff, the Vice President buff. This one you do not want to apply for unless it has been specifically arranged ahead of time that you are taking this buff. The reason is, once you have this buff, you are typically responsible to approve the queues for these 5 positions. This is typically under an alliance schedule where they know who's going to be VP. They know who's going to approve the queues. So once again, stay out of this queue. Don't apply for VP unless you know you're supposed to. Because why? It requires actual work. Now, there's some minor buffs you get from this, but I don't really take advantage of it. One last thing I should say. Even though this says construction speed at 50%, when you click on that, you're going to go, what? It didn't cut my time in half. And that's because it takes into account all the buffs that are already being applied. For example, I happen to have the pyramid buff here. So you can see from my decorations, I've got quite a bit of it here. But if I click on this and then I go to the pyramid, you can see I get a construction speed up from that already. So there's some formula Last War uses to apply those buffs. Now, if you have any questions, you want to know more about the buffs, if I missed something, if I skipped over something, you need some more information, feel free, hit me up in the comments. I can make another video for you. Dirk Diggler, Last War, Capital Buffs. See ya.